Hello, beautiful friends. My name is Brittany. This is Rescues and Reads. Welcome back or welcome to the channel. I'm so glad this video found you. Today, we are here to do my September Book of the Month predictions. I am joined by Sir Archibald, but he has not yet calmed down. So if the camera's a rockin', Archie's a knockin'. So hopefully he will settle down and go to sleep, but you might get a little jarred for the first few minutes of this video. September's a weird month because I feel like there are actually quite a few books being published. In fact, my list of predictions, I think, is basically near the max of my 20 book allowance for the predictions, but I'm honestly not really excited about any of them. And I don't know if it's just me still being a little bit in my reading slump or if these are really just not super spectacular releases, but honestly, none of these are jumping out to me. But since I do have quite a few books that I need to talk with you about here, we're going to go ahead and just jump right in. As per usual, I will read the synopses of these stories if they are relatively short, but if they are on the longer side, I'm just going to see if I can do a little bit of a sum up, maybe read a little bit of a blurb or something to that effect so that we are not here for hours upon hours. If you are new to this video, this is something that I do every single month just for fun to see how accurate I can be in predicting what book of the month is going to select either for its main monthly selections or its add-on selections. I'm allowed to predict up to 20 books across 5 distinct genre categories, or in this instance, I actually have one book for the memoir / nonfiction category, which is pretty unusual. I don't typically have that category, but there is something coming out in September that I do feel will be featured. So again, we have a lot to talk about. We are going to go ahead and just jump right in, starting as we usually do with the mystery, thriller, horror category. Now, I will say that I feel like September is pretty light within this category. And again, for the most part, for me, they are not really notable, although there is one big name that I have here, and that's actually Rachel Harrison's newest release called Play Nice. Rachel Harrison is actually a pretty well-known author, I feel like, at this point within the horror genre. I know that she has been featured on Aardvark previously, and I know a lot of people are probably going to be surprised that I'm featuring her here because I don't think that she's actually ever been featured on Book of the Month, but there has been a little bit of scuttlebutt about this book being featured on Book of the Month, which is why I wanted to go ahead and talk about this one here. This says, Cleo Louise Barnes leads a picture-perfect life as a stylist and influencer, but beneath the glossy veneer, she harbors a not-so-glamorous secret. She grew up in a haunted house. Well, not haunted, but possessed. After Cleo's parents' messy divorce, her mother Alex moved Cleo and her sisters into a house occupied by a demon, or so Alex claimed. That's not what Cleo's sisters remember or what the courts determined when they stripped her of custody after she went off the deep end. But Alex was insistent. She even wrote a book about her experience in the house. Okay, so this is giving me a little bit of Home Before Dark vibes by Riley Sager. After Alex's sudden death, the supposedly possessed house passed to Cleo and her sisters. Where her sisters see childhood trauma, Cleo sees an opportunity for house-flipping content. Only as the home makeover process begins, Cleo discovers there might be some truth to her mother's claims. As memories resurface and Cleo finally reads her mother's book, a sinister presence in the house manifests, revealing ugly truths that threaten to shake Cleo's beautiful life to its very foundation. So I've actually never read a Rachel Harrison before. To be honest, her books don't necessarily intrigue me, especially as somebody who is not a big horror lover. However, I'm actually pretty intrigued by the synopsis of this, especially because it's giving me those Home Before Dark vibes. So I may be willing to give Rachel Harrison a try if this one is featured on Book of the Month, just because I do think that this is a little bit more up my alley with regard to the horror subgenre, right? This is a take on the haunted house horror, which I do tend to enjoy for the most part. Okay, next, this is a book that I haven't really heard anybody talk about, but it is a dark academia that came on my radar, and I thought that it would be wonderful for this time of year. It is a book called The Bells by Lacey N. Dunham. It's 1951 at the secluded Bellerton College, and Dina Williams is an outsider doing her best to blend in with her wealthy and perfectly groomed peers. Infamous for its strict rules as much as its prestige, attending Bellerton could give Dina the comfortable life she's always dreamed of. She quickly forms an alliance with the 5 other freshmen on her floor, and soon they are singled out by the president's wife as the most promising girls of their class, who anoints them the Bells. They walk the college's halls in menacing unison, but no sisterhood comes without secrets, and the Bells are no exception. Playing cruel pranks on their dormitory house mother and embarking on boundary-shattering night games, the Bells test the limits of the campus rules. But as Dina begins to piece together the sinister history of Bellerton, her own past threatens to come to light, forcing her to make a dangerous choice. A chilling and seductive coming-of-age story, The Bells is an excavation of the dark side of girlhood, the intricacies of privilege, and the unbridled desire to belong at any cost. So that definitely sounds like it's going to have similar tropes that you are used to seeing in dark academia. It sounds like there's going to be like this group of mean girls, right? They're going to terrorize everything, but secrets are going to come to light and everything is going to change. I'm not necessarily sure how unique I find the synopsis of this, but it may be something that I am willing to give a try should it be featured on Book of the Month. Although, because I am in my reading slump right now, I think I'm going to be just a little bit more selective with regard to September selections, especially because, like I said, none of these are really jumping out at me at the moment. And those were actually the only 2 books that I had for the mystery thriller thriller horror category, so we're going to go ahead and move on into the romance category. Now, Brynne Weaver has a new release coming out in September. It is called Tourist Season. Now, if you're not familiar, Brynne Weaver has been featured multiple times on Book of the Month, primarily for her series Butcher and Blackbird, which is like the serial killer romances. I never got into those. I never read any of those, and I may be willing to check out more of her work in the future, but she's featured here just because she is a repeat author for Book of the Month. This is quite a long synopsis, so I'm just going to read this blurb and some of the tropes. It says, Tourist Season is a darkly funny, slow burn, enemies to lovers romance where destruction and desire are balanced on the edge of a blade, and where love is the most dangerous battleground of all. Tropes include small town romance, fish out of water, grumpy, forced proximity, he falls first, touch her, him, and die, and groveling. And again, I'm not opposed to trying anything by Brynne Weaver. I do like some of the tropes in here, specifically like the slow burn enemies to lovers. That sounds like it could be right up my alley. I like very, very specific things with regard to my romance, so this could be the one Brynne Weaver that I do decide to try. But I do think that there is a possibility of this being featured on Book of the Month in September. We also have the newest release from Bolu Babalola called Sweet Heat. Now, her book Honey and Spice has gotten a lot of praise. I don't think that that one was featured on Book of the Month, but I do think that something else of Bolu Babalola's was featured on Book of the Month in the past, which makes me think she could be a contender for the romance category. And again, Honey and Spice is really well regarded, and so I think Book of the Month might jump on the opportunity to feature this particular author. This says 28-year-old Kiki Banjo hosts the popular podcast The Heartbeat, solving romantic conundrums and dishing out life advice. Behind the scenes, though, career setbacks and a devastating breakup have left her hanging on by a thread. As she's preparing to be the maid of honor in her best friend's wedding, everything starts to unravel, and Kiki is left wondering if she ever had the answers. Then Kiki finds herself face to face with the best man, her ex-boyfriend Malachi, the smooth-talking, absurdly handsome, annoyingly perceptive man who stole her heart and then shattered it. While Kiki is approaching rock bottom, Malachi has been on the rise as a filmmaker, and now they have no choice but to play nice until the wedding is over. Both are hell-bent on ignoring the smoldering chemistry between them, but as they navigate the chaos of wedding plans, career ambitions, and Kiki's growing fears about the future, they can't ignore the spark that's only getting hotter. So this is definitely going to be a second chance romance. I typically can enjoy a second chance romance, especially if it's done well, and I think that the reason that they broke up in the past was redeemable, right? Like, I typically don't think cheating is a redeemable thing. I never would want to see a second chance romance after they split because of cheating, but this does sound like it could be a potentially strong second chance romance, especially because there's some harder hitting elements there as our main character is really struggling with where she is in life and is afraid of the future. I have never read anything by this author, but I am intrigued by this and wouldn't mind giving her a shot. And then the final one is from yet another Book of the Month repeat author, which is Kate Robb and her newest release, Kitty St. Clair's Last Dance. Now, I will say that this one is coming out on September 30th, so typically when we have a book that is being released much later in the month, there's just as much of a likelihood of it being featured within its month of release as it is the following month. So it's possible that if this one is going to be featured, we could also see it in October. But again, because I only focus on the releases of the month in question, we're going to go ahead and include it here. This says, Jules is stunned when eccentric and glamorous retiree Kitty St. Clair passes away and leaves her a dilapidated dance hall in their quaint lakeside community. That is until Reeve, a charming, successful developer, returns to town looking for the new owner of the dance hall, intent on turning it into luxury vacation condos. Suddenly, Jules has a way to make her lifelong dream of going to medical school a reality. But selling the dance hall will only add to the steadily rising real estate prices, making it harder for the residents of her tiny vacation town to live there. Not to mention, Reeve also happens to be the man who Jules shared a magical night with 2 summers ago and never heard from again. Reeve wants a second chance with Jules and is determined to earn back her trust, but can she let herself fall for him again? Does he want her or a guaranteed sale? Jules wishes she could talk to Kitty, who always seemed to have the best advice, so she turns to the diary she left her. But as Jules falls asleep reading, she wakes up in the world of the diary. 50 years ago, accompanying a young Kitty to the dance hall in all its glory, her dream visits to Kitty's past begin to parallel the questions plaguing her in her own world. Will Kitty's past hold the keys to unlocking Jules's future? So it definitely sounds like there's going to be somewhat of a speculative element to this, because she is going to be kind of like transported through dreams back to Kitty's era in like the 1960s, 1970s. So that is pretty interesting, an interesting premise. Again, I don't know if it's something that's grabbing me. I don't know if I would rush to pick this up, but Kate Robb has been featured on Book of the Month in the past, and I thought this one sounded interesting. Moving on into historical fiction, as per usual, this is typically the lightest category, and that is no different this time. I only have one book to talk to you about here, and that is a book called Buckeye by Patrick Ryan. In Bonamy, Ohio, a stolen moment of passion, sparked in the exuberant aftermath of the Allied victory in Europe, binds Cal Jenkins, a man wounded not in war, but by his inability to serve in it, to Margaret Salt, a woman trying to obscure her past. Cal's wife, Becky, has a spiritual gift. She is a seer who can conjure the dead, helping families connect with those they've lost. Margaret's husband, Felix, is serving on a Navy cargo ship out of harm's way until a telegram suggests that the unthinkable might have happened. Later, as the country reconstructs books in the post-war boom, a secret grows in Bonamy, but nothing stays buried forever in a small town. Against the backdrop of some of the most transformative decades in modern America, the consequences of that long-ago encounter ripple through the next generation of both families, compelling them to re-examine who they thought they were and what the future might hold. So again, it sounds like this is going to have some type of speculative element to it. Not entirely sure what the trajectory of this is supposed to be, but it sounds like it's all going to revolve around this moment between Cal Jenkins and Margaret Salt. This is one that I have seen going around. It seems like it's getting a lot of buzz, which is what put it on my radar and is one of the reasons why I wanted to go ahead and mention it here. All right, and then as always, the biggest category in these predictions is the literary/contemporary fiction category. I always feel like this category is full to bursting. This is definitely one of the biggest months that we've had so far this year. So the first book that I want to mention is a book called The Irish Goodbye by Heather Amy O'Neill, and it sounds like this is going to be a family drama centered around sisters. It says, it's been years since the three Ryan sisters were all together at their beloved family home on the eastern shore of Long Island. 2 decades ago, their lives were upended by an accident on their brother Topher's boat. A friend's brother was killed. The resulting lawsuit nearly bankrupted their parents, and Topher spiraled into depression, eventually taking his life. Now the Ryan women are back for Thanksgiving, eager to reconnect, but each carrying a heavy secret. The eldest, Kate, still holding guilt for the role no one knows she played in the boat accident, rekindles a flame with her high school crush, Topher's best friend and the brother of the boy who died. Middle sister Alice has been thrown a curveball that threatens the career she's starting and faces a difficult decision that may doom her marriage. And the youngest, Maggie, is finally taking the risk of bringing the woman she loves home to meet her devoutly Catholic mother. Infusing everything is the grief for Topher that none of the Ryans have figured out how to carry together. When Kate invites a guest from their shared past to Thanksgiving, old tensions boil over and new truths surface, nearly overpowering the flickering light of their family bond. Far more than a family holiday will be ruined unless the sisters can find a way to forgive themselves and one another. So yes, very, very family drama-esque. There's a lot of estrangement going on here since the tragedy on their brother Topher's boat, and then Topher ends up taking his life. They've all been separated, carrying a lot of guilt, and now they're coming back together, and it sounds like there's going to be a lot of uproar. This is definitely a book that I feel like is right up my alley, but it's also the type of book that I don't necessarily find myself in the mood to read all that often. You know what I mean? So this is something that I might gravitate toward, but might not be immediately inspired to pick up. I don't know. This one I do find pretty intriguing, and I'm gonna have it on my radar. The next book we have is a book called To the Moon and Back by Eliana Ramaj. This again is quite a long synopsis, so I'm just gonna read this blurb here. One young woman's relentless quest to become the first Cherokee astronaut will irrevocably alter the fates of the people she loves most in this tour de force of a debut about ambition, belonging, and family. Another very character-driven novel, but I feel like this is a very different lens. We're going to have Indigenous representation. We're going to have a Cherokee woman who's going to try to be the first Cherokee woman as an astronaut, and that's phenomenal. I think the release of this book is likely going to be pretty popular considering the success of Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Obviously, this is a very different story with different plots, themes, messages, all of that stuff. And honestly, this might give me what Atmosphere did not give me, because Atmosphere was a very disappointing read for me. It did not deliver on what I wanted it to deliver. So this could be one that I pick up just to see if I do enjoy it more. And again, I really love all of the things that are going on in here. So yes, highly anticipating this one. Next, John Boyne actually has a new release coming out in September called The Elements. John Boyne has been featured multiple times on Book of the Month. One of his books was actually a Lolly Award winner back, I think, in 2017. It was something that I actually just recently read for the project that I'm doing where I read all of the Book of the Year finalists. I would not be surprised at all, obviously, to see John Boyne featured again on Book of the Month, considering his popularity. And now, after having read The Heart's Invisible Furies, I am very much more intrigued with John Boyne as an author. This says, in The Elements, acclaimed Irish novelist John Boyne has created an epic saga that weaves together 4 interconnected narratives, each representing a different perspective on crime: the enabler, the accomplice, the perpetrator, and the victim. The narrative follows a mother on the run from her past, a young soccer star facing a trial, a successful surgeon grappling with childhood trauma, and a father on a transformative journey with his son. Each is somehow connected to the next, and as the story unfolds, their lives intersect in unimaginable ways. I love that. That doesn't give you a lot, but that is absolutely enough to intrigue me to want to pick up this book. So this is definitely a top contender for me. Like, if I was going to hit buy on Book of the Month, I think that this would be one of the top things in my cart for September. Another book that I have seen kind of going around is a book called The Wilderness by Angela Flournoy. I'm probably pronouncing that horribly incorrectly. This says, an era-defining novel about 5 Black women over the course of their 20-year friendship as they move through the dizzying and sometimes precarious period between young adulthood and midlife, in a much-anticipated second book from National Book Award finalist Angela Flournoy. The Wilderness is Angela Flournoy's masterful and kaleidoscopic follow-up to her critically acclaimed debut, The Turner House, a generational talent she captures with disarming wit and electric language how the most profound connections over a lifetime can lie in the tangled and uncertain thicket of friendship. Now, this says it's a follow-up to the Turner House, and I don't know if that means that these are connected stories or if they just mean follow-up as in this is her second novel following that successful first debut novel. So I'm going to go ahead and say that that's probably what they mean by it. You don't actually have to read the first book. But again, I have been seeing this one going around all over the place, so I thought that it would be a good one to mention here. The next book that I have is a book called Boy from the North Country by Sam Sussman. When Evan, 26, is suddenly called home from his life abroad to the secluded farmhouse where he was raised by his mother June, there is so much he does not yet know. He doesn't know his mother is dying. He still doesn't know the identity of his biological father or the elusive story of his mother's creatively intense, emotionally turbulent romance with Bob Dylan, whom Evan reveres as an artist and whom strangers have long insisted he resembles. He doesn't know the secrets of his mother's life before he was born or what drove her to leave New York City for a completely different existence. In this deeply moving debut novel, Sam Sussman writes one of the most tender and intimate mother-son relationships of our era, caring for his mother as her illness worsens, and as she begins to tell him truths he has waited so long to hear, Evan comes to understand the startling gift this extraordinary woman has bequeathed him. Inspired by the author's own uncertain celebrity paternity, Boy from the North Country is an emotionally searing meditation on the most essential human themes: loss, healing, memory, and the redemptive power of love. So again, very, very character-driven, right? Very powerful themes of family, especially regarding a mother-son relationship. We have a mother who is dying, and some secrets are going to come out that she's never shared with her son, and there's going to be probably some kind of a reckoning included in that. This is definitely something that is right up Book of the Month's alley. It covers so many things that they have typically showcased in the past, and that is why I thought that this would be a top contender for this category for sure. All right, we are getting there with regard to this category. I think I only have two more to talk about. A book that I have been seeing getting a lot of buzz, it's actually a part of the Booker Prize long list, is a book called The Loneliness of Sonia and Sunny by Kiran Desai. This says, when Sonia and Sunny first glimpse each other on an overnight train, they are immediately captivated yet also embarrassed by the fact that their grandparents had once tried to matchmake them, a clumsy meddling that served only to drive Sonia and Sunny apart. Sonia, an aspiring novelist who recently completed her studies in the snowy mountains of Vermont, has returned to her family in India. She fears that she is haunted by a dark spell cast by an artist to whom she had once turned to for intimacy and inspiration. Sunny, a struggling journalist, resettled in New York City, is attempting to flee his imperious mother and the violence of his warring clan. Uncertain of their future, Sonia and Sunny embark on a search for happiness together as they confront the many alienations of our modern world. The Loneliness of Sonia and Sunny is a sweeping tale of two young people navigating the many forces that shape their lives: country, class, race, history, and the complicated bonds that link one generation to the next. A love story, a family saga, and a rich novel of ideas. It is the most ambitious and accomplished work yet by one of our greatest novelists. I've actually never heard of this author before. I've never read anything by this author before. But again, a lot of themes that is right up Book of the Month's alley to feature, right? It's going to be a character-driven study, obviously focusing on Sonia and Sunny, and after they reconnect and what they go through, and as they're navigating all of the challenges of their lives. Again, this is not necessarily one that is doing anything crazy unique for me. It's not something that is jumping out at me, but if I hear a lot of great praise about this, if a lot of people are really, really loving it, it could certainly be something that I am willing to check out in the future. All right, and then the very last one that I have is Heart the Lover by Lily King. Lily King is, again, a repeat author on Book of the Month, which is why I'm featuring her here. This is another book that is coming out at the end of September, as is, I believe, The Irish Goodbye. I haven't been paying attention, but I believe these two books are featured at the end of September. So again, we could see them in October instead. I'm just going to read this blurb here. Written with the superb wit and emotional sensitivity fans and critics of Lily King have come to adore, Heart the Lover is a deeply moving love story that celebrates literature, forgiveness, and the transformative bonds that shape our lives. Wise, unforgettable, and with a delightful connective thread to writers and lovers, this is King at her very best, affirming her as a masterful chronicler of the human experience and one of the finest novelists at work today. I don't know if you've noticed, but so many of these blurbs are claiming these authors are the finest at what they do in the world today. I cannot speak of that for Lily King because I've never read anything by her, but if you enjoyed Writers and Lovers, you might enjoy The Lover, and apparently it does have connections to Writers and Lovers, so that makes it, in my opinion, an even stronger contender that Book of the Month would feature. All right, and moving on into the fantasy sci-fi / magical realism portion of the predictions, we have the newest release from Erin A. Craig called A Land So Wide. Now, I've actually heard phenomenal things about this author. She's been featured on Book of the Month in the past, but I've never actually tried anything by her. This says, like everyone else in the settlement of Mistaken, Greer Mackenzie is trapped. Founded by an ambitious lumber merchant, the village is blessed with rich natural resources that have made its people prosperous, but at a cost. The same woods that have lined the townsfolk's pockets harbor dangerous beasts, wolves, bears, and the bright-eyeds, monsters beyond description who have rained utter destruction down on nearby settlements. But Mistaken's founders made a deal with the mysterious benevolence, the the warding stones that surround the town will keep the bright-eyes out and the town's citizens in. Anyone who spends a night within Mistaken's borders belongs to it forever. Greer, a mapmaker and eccentric dreamer, has always ached to explore the world outside, even though she knows she and her longtime love, Ellis Beaufort, will never see it. Until on the day she and Ellis are meant to finally begin their lives together, Greer watches in horror as her beloved disappears beyond the warding stones, pursued by a monstrous creature. Determined to rescue Ellis, she figures out a way to defy Mistaken's curse and begins a trek through the cold and pitiless wilderness. But there, Greer is hunted not only by the ruthless Bright-Eyes, but by the secret truths behind Mistaken's founding and her own origins. Playfully drawing from Scottish folklore, Aaron A. Craig's adult debut is both a deeply atmospheric and profoundly romantic exploration of freedom versus security, a stunning celebration of one woman's relentless bravery on a quest to reclaim her lost love and seize her own future. Okay, so this is actually her adult debut, which I did not realize, and that actually makes me even more intrigued. This is giving me vibes similar to the adult novel that Shay Earnshaw wrote, which was also her adult debut, and so I'm really intrigued by this one, actually. Of course, I wouldn't get this one specifically from Book of the Month just because I want my fantasy novels in their original editions or special editions, but again, this is another one that I am putting on my radar for sure. All right, next we actually have Thief of Night by Holly Black. This is the second book in the Charlatan duology, the first being Book of Night. Now, Book of Night was featured on Book of the Month, if I'm not mistaken. I never read that. I heard awful things about it, so it was kind of on my radar, and then it was quickly removed from my radar because so many people disliked that book. I'm not going to say anything about the synopsis of this one just because I do not want to risk any spoilers, but if you did get Book of Night in the Book of the Month edition and you are planning on continuing in the duology, be on the lookout for this one for sure. Rebecca Ross has a new release coming out in September. It is called Wild Reverence. I do believe that this does have connections to the Divine Rivals duology, which was featured on Book of the Month. I didn't love that duology like everybody else seemed to. It didn't hit for me, which is unfortunate because I really liked the idea of it, the synopsis of it, but the execution of it did not quite work like I wanted it to, so I don't know if I would be picking this one up, but I know a lot of people are really excited about it and they love her writing, especially with regard to some of her other novels, which I've also heard really amazing things about. This says, born in the firelit domain of the Underrealm, Matilda is the youngest goddess of her clan, blessed with humble messenger magic. But in a land where gods often kill each other to steal power and alliances break as quickly as they are forged, Matilda must come of age sooner than most. She may be known to carry words and letters through the realms, but she holds a secret she must hide from even her dearest of allies to ensure her survival. And to complicate matters, there is a mortal boy who dreams of her, despite the fact they have never met in the waking world. 2 years ago, Vincent of Beckett wrote to Matilda on the darkest night of his life, begging the goddess he befriended in dreams to help him. When his request went unanswered, Vincent moved on, becoming the hardened, irreverent lord of the river who has long forgotten Matilda. That is, until she comes tumbling into his bedroom window with a letter for him. As fate would have it, Matilda and Vincent were destined to find each other beyond dreams. There may be a chance for Matilda to rewrite the blood-soaked ways of the gods, but at immense sacrifice. She will have to face something she fears even more than losing her magic, to be vulnerable and to allow herself finally to be loved. So I actually really enjoyed the synopsis of this, but again, I thought that I was going to really enjoy Divine Rivals 2 by the sound of it, and I just didn't care for it. So I think I'm gonna wait and hear a little bit more about this one before I take the plunge, but I do think that this one sounds really intriguing. All right, everyone, and typically that would be the final category. However, as I mentioned earlier, I do have one for the memoir/nonfiction category because Elizabeth Gilbert has a new release called All the Way to the River, Love, Loss, and Liberation. Elizabeth Gilbert, I feel like she's a very love or hate kind of author. People either love her or hate her with a passion. Like, I know some people who absolutely despised Eat, Pray, Love. I never read it, so I cannot speak to it either way, but they're like, absolutely not will I ever pick up another Elizabeth Gilbert. And then other people love her. They love her books. Again, she's not somebody that I'm interested in, especially as I'm not really a non-fiction girly, but because she's been featured on Book of the Month in the past, because she's really popular, I did feel an obligation to feature this one here. This says, in 2000, Elizabeth Gilbert met Rhea. They became friends, then best friends, then inseparable. When tragedy entered their lives, the truth was finally laid bare. The two were in love. They were also a pair of addicts on a collision course towards catastrophe. What if your most beautiful love story turned into your biggest nightmare? What if the dear friend who taught you so much about your self-destructive tendencies became the unstable partner with whom you disastrously reenacted every one of them? And what if your most devastating heartbreak opened a pathway to your greatest awakening? All the Way to the River is a landmark memoir that will resonate with anyone who has ever been captive to love or to any other passion, substance, or craving, and who yearns at long last for liberation. This is essentially going to be all about a turbulent relationship that she had with a woman when they were addicts and on a collision course. Once again, I have absolutely no interest in this, but I know that it's going to be appealing to a lot of people, so I wanted to go ahead and mention it here. All right, everybody, that is it. We made it through. Those are some of the books I think could be potentially featured in September on Book of the Month, either as main selections or add-on selections. As per usual, please comment down below and let me know if there are any any books that I didn't include here that you think could potentially be featured as well, or if you are excited in particular about any of the books that I talked about, or whether you think that it could be a pass month for you. Or if you've made it to the end of this video and you are not feeling chatty, go ahead and leave me some type of nature emoji, because I feel like a lot of the books that we talked about had some kind of wilderness or nature element in the title or within the description or something to that effect. Go ahead and leave that down below. And as always, if you like this video or if you just like me, please be sure to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. I typically post 1 to 2 videos a week, and I would love to connect with you in any of those future videos. Or if you'd prefer to connect with me outside of BookTube, you can always find links to my Goodreads, Instagram, and Patreon, as well as YouTube memberships linked down below, along with any books talked about in the video. Until next time, y'all. Bye.